catch up on that controversy later. But thanks to the organizers for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work. And thanks to all of you for coming out on a Friday night. That's very kind of you. And since you have come out and spent your time here, I should talk about serious issues. Anti-terrorism laws, laws on domestic extremism, and new organized crime laws are being used in a number of countries to crack down on legitimate democratic forms of dissent and social protest. Recent events in Austria are a disturbing example of this. We see the manipulation of the criminal code to stop the work of animal activists. These activists were successful in introducing a number of important reforms, and indeed attracted the admiration of people around the world who believed that Austria was setting a good example in the development of humane legislation. However, that image of a progressive Austria has now been replaced by a much darker image, indeed one that calls up echoes from a much more repressive past. Well, there are others here who are far more competent than I to discuss the details of that case, but I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss some other issues and to talk about the political uses of something that has come to be called animal rights terrorism. Well, the prevention of terrorism is certainly a serious matter, especially if we look to the original use of the term terrorism to describe the use of violence by states against innocent people. And there are many significant examples of this from recent times. I don't need to go over that sad and sorry list. If we limit the scope to terrorist activities by non-state actors and focus on those that have been committed by groups that are opposed to the foreign policies of Western states, we still see many serious crimes. The July 2010 bombings at the Kayadondo Rugby Club and the Ethiopian Village Restaurant in Kampala, the bombings in Bali in 2002 and 2005, the Madrid train bombings in 2004, and of course the spectacular destruction of the World Trade Center in 2001. All of these attributed to Islamist groups like Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab. In all of these cases, we see that terrorism involves the murder of innocent civilians. Indeed, one academic who has looked at this, Chalecki, points out that the violent death of unsuspecting people in events such as hijacked airliners crashing into the World Trade Center is what comes to most people's minds when we think of terrorism. Similarly, Schmid, another academic study, cites the communicative aspect of murderous violence as the central aspect of terrorism. The U.S. Department of State's Office of the Coordinator for Counterterrorism also emphasizes life-threatening attacks in its definition of terrorism. However, if we turn from these serious cases to the issue at hand, animal rights terrorism, we find nothing comparable. Indeed, I suggest that animal rights terrorism is in fact the creation of industries that profit from the exploitation of animals. Those industries are responsible for the hideous suffering and the premature death of billions of individual animals. And the scale and the degree of suffering endured by non-human animals at our hands are scarcely conceivable. These industries not only inflict agony and death on individual animals, but they also devastate the environment, thus destroying the habitat of other animals, leading to the extinction of entire species, as well as endangering the future of human life through the pollution of air, soil, and water, global warming, the production of new pathogens and global pandemics, as well as epidemic levels of obesity and other diseases, a host of serious health threats that endanger the lives of those who consume animals. Animal activists raise serious questions about all of these issues, and in doing so, they challenge the financial interests of these industries. To meet these challenges, industries mobilize to delegitimize, marginalize, and demonize their critics. Those who profit from the exploitation of animals construct powerful narratives to justify their power over others and to make their exploitation of other beings seem natural, normal, and acceptable. So, anti-animal rights propaganda draws support from a wide variety of sources. Farmers, hunters, ranchers, the pet industry, circuses, rodeos, other forms of animal exploitation-based entertainment, dealers in fur and leather, restaurants, grocery chains, and major corporations in agribusiness, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and vivisection industries, as well as the military, with fantastic amounts of money involved in all of this, of course. All of these voices agree on what they consider their right to exploit animals, and together they form a chorus of anti-animal rights propaganda. In order to make their exploitation seem acceptable rather than cruel and murderous, industries must present the violence that they carry out in a better light. So corporations and their public relations industries work to shape public discourse. Industry propaganda normalizes exploitation while presenting critics as dangerous and irrational. One tactic is to portray activists as extremists, fanatics, and increasingly as terrorists, and to depict them as anti-human. Despite the fact that historically the animal rights movement has always been aligned with other progressive social justice movements, the struggle for women's emancipation, for children's rights, anti-slavery, and human rights generally. However, corporate managers understand that depicting activists as terrorists is preferable to recognizing them as serious critics with identifiable goals, supported by rational arguments that would have to be acknowledged and answered. Propaganda against animal rights focuses on violence committed by activists. Of course, this masks the violence that is committed by industry on a massive scale. Intensive breeding, warehousing and killing of animals in factory farms and slaughterhouses under appalling conditions, and horrifying torture in vivisection laboratories. These violent practices are normalized, accepted as industry standards, and legally permitted. Just as powerful states engage with impunity in actions that would be denounced as terrorism and answered with military force when conducted by others, so do we accept the most hideous atrocities when they are inflicted on animals. But it's simply prejudice to denounce violence when it's committed against non-humans.